years ago, before the internet, having a fax on demand lines, people could call in and get information on our listings. I'm like, maybe the internet will help that, right? So I'd like to start off with asking you guys about technology that you've adopted lately that's working for you, and what is it and how are you using it?
I'd like to start by saying it's fascinating to listen to all of the innovation that's happening in the world. And I actually volunteer for the Battle of the Startups at Georgia Tech, just so I can hear what's coming. Because it's exciting. It's exciting to see how technology can revolutionize the way we live. But we have a tendency at North American to really to understand it. It's important that we understand it, but to really look at how it improves the user experience, how it really improves the guest experience. It's we try not to focus, or try not to just be the ones who are out there with throwing out a bell and a whistle, to be able to say we are, if we don't really know that it's going to help and improve the user experience. But one of the technologies that we've been using lately is VR, and moving into AR with our partners in crime and Vibe. They were set up outside to show what we were doing at Colony Square. Here we had this 50-year-old fortress, this project that's a sea of cement, and it was built so you can't get in it. And once you get in, it's hard to find your way back out. And when we bought it, I think our first press release was, we're going to rip the roof off. And people were like, you're going to do what? And it was really difficult to share our vision, and how we're going to reimagine Colony Square. And so in working with Ben and his team, we're able to take Colony Square and take a site plan and our modeling and turn it into a walkthrough. So it's so much easier, and it's been extremely effective in walking not just retail tenants through the experience, but also office tenants. And because they're like, I get it. It's like when you try to say what you're doing, it's like, I don't get it. But when you can physically walk through it, it makes a huge difference. And it's really great to see how VR is starting to evolve into an AR, given the fact that almost every device now has the technology there, so it's easier and becoming less expensive to create. But it's been an extremely useful tool in our ability to share our vision of Colony Square, and we'll definitely use it as we continue with these ground-up developments. Imagine walking out with a screen when you're staring at dirt, and to be able to walk down the boulevard of your mixed-use community and be able to show people how it's all going to lay out. It's very effective. So I'd say that, VR, AR.
And so that's working with your tenants. I guess especially with the retail tenants, right? When you're doing these mixed-use developments and they're looking at dirt and they're trying to figure out, well, how is this all going to interact, right, with all the other uses? Mm-hmm. They're going to visually see it.
Absolutely. Makes a huge difference.
And it's kind of interesting, of course, you guys are in Atlanta, know when Colony Square was built, you needed to be a fortress.
Right.
Right? You needed. So what are you guys using, Maitland?
So right now, I would say, kind of to echo Matt's point earlier, we're immersed in the office world right now, so that's what's on my mind at the moment. But it is really, how do you make the experience for your tenants as seamless as possible from when they arrive to your property to when they actually sit down at their desk. So there are like tons of really, really boring technologies out there that make a huge difference. Like, just for instance, we have a partnership with Park Mobile. They are going to install hardware that can actually read your license plate when you pull up, and will also kind of give you some information on the best place to go in the parking deck and actually settle down. What is really exciting to me, that takes like 10% of the pain of arriving at your building out of the picture, I guess. What's really exciting to me, though, is that within a few years, I think those systems will be able to talk to building management systems, to the security systems, et cetera, so that you'll pull into the deck, your phone will know that you're in the deck. Say you're a visitor, beacons will have your information, Park Mobile has your information, so they can kind of gather all of that info from your phone. You show up at the front desk, and the security guard kind of already knows who you are, and then can just kind of usher you into the elevators. Literally, we're installing a system called Destination Dispatch, where if you work in the building, you come in, you swipe your card, and it says, hey, Michael, please go to elevator D, and the wait times on the elevator are literally cut in half just from using technology like that. So that's kind of what we're focused on, is how can all these disparate systems that are now kind of bolted together awkwardly talk together or talk to each other a little more effectively and improve the end user experience.
Our focus has been more so, we've been using a lot of massive mobile data, so understanding where are my shoppers coming from, where do they live. You know, a 2 or 1, 3, 5 mile radius is not really, for real estate, it's not that useful anymore. So if people who are coming to this Whole Foods Center, where do they live? And trying really hard to use that massive mobile data. We're on our, I think, our 3rd year and our 3rd vendor, kind of agilely testing these vendors to understand how many of them are coming in my center, how long are they staying, are they actually buying things, or are they just coming? So that whole meetup of our visitors, shoppers, I can drive a lot of traffic to my center, but I'm actually helping my tenants drive sales with that same technology. So that's, the massive mobile data has been a big part for us. Also, tools that help us understand sentiment around our shopping centers. I was trying to think of what else. We're not working a lot with the autonomous car thing yet, but we're tracking it very closely to understand the nitty-gritty of parking and ingress and egress and shopping centers. And if you got to go to Whole Foods 3 times a week, how's autonomous driving going to affect that? So.
How about using technology that's interacting with you as a landlord and your tenant? And when you're talking to tenants, talking about to them, you know, what are they using to be successful in any of your tests?
So it's actually kind of a big question. We have been going through this whole thing for the past several years of being, when we're talking to a tenant about being in one of our centers, we want to understand, do they have a plan for digital? How are they going to communicate? We've tested tools on how we communicate with our tenants, older things like red flag, and how do we communicate important alerts or whatever's happening. Honestly, we have not found the magic bullet yet. It's been very, you know, I think the experience is a little different if you're talking about malls or lifestyle centers, because people are going there for a reason. They want to communicate with the retailers a little bit more. They're going there to shop. Do you really want things pinging your phone every time you're going to Publix is a different thing, or every time you go to your yoga studio? So we're still playing with that technology. How about you guys?
I would say that we focus on, because we're developers, but
Can you hear in the back okay?
we're developers, and we focus on developing that user experience. So when we're developing, we really like to look at how is this going to work. It's not as much about the buildings. It's not about stores, about stories and, you know, all that. About building heart share rather than market share, and developing an emotional connection. So when we're looking at technology and how to communicate, we want to be where our guests and our customers, we consider our office tenants and our retailers, you know, are our customers, and their customers are our guests. That we want to make sure we're communicating with them where they are, and it's online. So it's we have very robust, you know, social media programs, and it's all online. It's all, you know, we wherever you are, we're going to be there. And because we feel like that there's more of a connection there than automating the system. So right now I'd say it's really more one-on-one and leveraging our digital platform to connect with our tenants and also our guests.
Yeah, I would say one of the, you know, in everything that we do, what we're effectively trying to do is build community around it, because one, we think it's the right thing to do, and it's more fun if you're doing that, but two, you know, it increases the satisfaction of your tenants, it increases retention, and then ultimately rents as well. There's some co-living and co-working concepts out there that have pretty effectively leveraged Slack as a way for all of the people who are existing in the space to communicate with one another. I think in co-working it's particularly cool because you have all these different types of people who probably are fairly like-minded. A lot of them are trying to solve somewhat similar problems, but they're in and out of the office at different times. There's no, you know, there are always events set up and whatever, but there's no really good way for them to talk to each other in a seamless way. You would probably be surprised. I'm going to mention the goat farm here. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the goat farm in Atlanta, but it's like everybody thinks it's this artist commune on the west side, but in reality, they have tons of people over there. They have over 500 people working in their studios. They do everything from, you know, they are painters and sculptors to like making super high-end boutique sailing equipment. And they have actually implemented this program that allows for people who are trying to solve similar issues to kind of communicate with each other and collaborate, and then, you know, ultimately get together face to face. So I think that's a really big opportunity. Everybody who's doing that right now is kind of building out their own system, which obviously costs tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they see it as worth it. So I think that would be a huge opportunity for a local company, hopefully.
And Jessica, you mentioned a challenge with something that you need. What else do you guys need? What do you have that needs fixed? What problem do you have? Or what's not working as well as you like? What kind of technology would you like to see?
I could start with, we're really, so when you're taking on a shopping center, mixed-use community that's 50 years old, parking, maybe the parking ratios were defined a little differently back then. So it's, from our perspective, it's looking at how do we leverage technology to improve that experience, which we're doing some of the same things that the city's doing in terms of making the parking experience a little more friendly and freeing up space, because when you've got a mixed-use community and you've got the energy curve, it's great because there's an ebb and flow all during the day, but you've got 3,000 office tenants who are putting their cars in your deck for 8 hours, and that's leaving less space for retail. Then you've got the autonomous cars coming in, so it's like, oh, maybe we'll need less space. But then you've got office spaces densifying, so you've got 3 people per 150 square feet, where it used to be 1, and so you've got more people coming in. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how you balance that when you have a building that's constrained and you can't really do much more with the parking than you already have. So we're doing some of the same things with leveraging technology to get people in and out easier, help you find spaces. Where's the green light? Go there. Which floors have spaces on them, and that. But be curious to know if there's any other technologies out there to give you more parking spaces than you actually have.
Have you done a trial with smarking?
Smarking.
Is it because they're MIT graduates? Is that why you said
It's
that?
not just because they're MIT alums, no, they're.
Smarking?
Anything with smart. There is a group that's fracking the parking conversation as well, so I'm glad that we can talk about it later.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I just wanted to share sort of a contrarian view from Robin Chase. So she's the founder of Zipcar. She's now leading an alliance with all these different ride-sharing services, Lyft, Uber, Didi, and so forth. And her take on it is as the price of cars go down, the cost of operating goes down, nobody will park. That they'll just keep driving around because there's no need to park.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's leading this sort of interesting, or she's done a bunch of research on it that I think is interesting to kind of see.
That's a good point. And I'm curious, as you're doing the new developments and you're redeveloping properties, are you seeing a less need for parking by any of the tenants or the patrons yet? And how's it working with zoning? Are you able to maybe have a little less parking? And do you feel like if you're doing a new development that you're creating too much parking that in 10 years it's going to be empty?
From a tenant needs perspective, no, they're not asking for less parking. They're
They're
very
not there yet.
concerned about parking. That's still a need. And from a zoning perspective, no, cities are still, there's not a lot of forward thinking in terms of, for tenants in cities yet and saying, well, this is not going to be needed soon. We are being a lot more aware with our developments, how we structure the parking, and are we building it in a way that if we don't need this parking in 5 years or 10 years, what else can we do with it? But we are seeing from a shopper, consumer, community standpoint, they are not, it's interesting because as a user or shopper, you think, oh, I want a place to park my car. But when we're developing a center, they do not want a big ugly parking field either. So how do you balance these two needs? But no, I think we're not quite to the point yet where we're able to say less parking because we're not going to need it.
Experience anything different?
Fortunately, in the office world, it's going the other direction because parking costs $32,000 a space. So, that's like 20% of our development budget. So to whatever extent you can whittle away at that, that is like massive, massive savings. And I would say, fortunately, you know, on our sites, we benefit from the Beltline. Ponce City Market, they originally thought 20 people would use alternative transportation as opposed to cars, and they just did a new study about 6 months ago, and it's actually 36% are getting there via Uber or the Beltline or alternative means. So that's obviously huge. And then, of course, driverless cars, you know, who
It's hard to
knows what
say.
that will do to the world. But we're going ahead and taking steps. We actually worked with the engineers at Uber and at Lyft to say, hey, what are the sorts of obstacles that like trip you up with driverless cars? And so they said, well, you know, if you actually, you know, bring the curbs up just like an extra 2 or 3 inches, and if you install these sensors in the drive aisle, et cetera. So trying to think forward, and who knows how that will all roll out, but trying to make minor tweaks where we can.
Well,
The parking changes are coming, but from tech perspective, it would really help us to have more data
Yeah.
about how much less parking do we really need to be able to convince retailers or
It's tough. I
or
can
cities.
share, you know, one story too is in trying to figure out, you know, what is it? We're smarking. We're going to talk about smarking now. We hired a mobility concierge. It was a position that didn't exist, and the person we hired had not been one before. But he is so passionate about alternative modes of transportation. He doesn't have a car. He rides his bike everywhere. He lives downtown. He's young and just lives for transit. And so we brought him on board, and he literally spends all day, every day, talking to tenants, talking to anyone who wants to talk about it, to help them understand alternative ways to get where they want to go without having to get in their cars. Because, you know, getting in your car in Atlanta is not a pleasant experience most of the time. And he's moved 500 of our tenants into alternative modes of transportation. And that helped us actually sign at least with IPIC. They were concerned about our parking ratios and their ability to have space when they needed it. And bringing on this person who created this one-on-one connection and was like, I will hold your hand, I will walk you to MARTA, I will get you on the train, I will get you off the train, I'll get you home. So that they would get people over the obstacles of just even trying something new. That one-on-one connection has really helped. But that is, and we actually got the lease signed with IPIC because we were able to free up spaces. There's got to be a more efficient way, so.
so how are you guys funding technology? Are you having challenge with investors or lenders? I sold an office building recently that had a lot of temporary space, co-working type of space, and the lenders were like, oh, wait a minute, where's your 5 and 10-year leases? And we were able to get it done, but it was difficult. So, and I go in some office buildings as we tenant rep, and I see there's, in some cases, not like technology. When I ask a landlord about it, they say, well, we don't have enough people or enough time. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You can finance it and make your money back, right? Who said it was free? It's not really going to cost you anything. Are you guys having trouble with that part of your company or your tenants or your lenders or investors? To getting it done, to get it paid for, to get it involved?
I don't know that I have an answer for that one.
I would say most of our investors they're so excited that we're trying to be forward-thinking and trying to incorporate technology. They want to work with local development partners who are going to think forward and do that. The only time they're scared of it is when it's something that is like physical in the building. So if it's like a way for tenants to communicate, they love it, they don't care, they say, you're the local operator, go for it. But for instance, like with the elevator system I described, they need to be able to go to another project and see that it works. So some of the stuff that involves like, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of upfront cost, being the first mover is going to be a tough sell.
Some more questions from the crowd?
I've got a note on a challenge
Okay.
that you asked about, which we are always talking to our different CREtech companies about helping us with, which kind of connects to what you were just saying about funding. We also, I mean, we're publicly traded, so we have to be able to show that if we're going to invest in something, it's going to, there's going to be a return. We have been very lucky that the company allows us to test things. But the challenge that we've had a lot of tech companies come to us with great tools. Like, this does a great thing, this does a great thing. We're like, awesome. But it won't integrate with the rest of our systems. or it's too difficult to integrate with the rest of our systems, or the barrier to start using it. I mean, some people, a lot of people, you guys know, have been in real estate for 20 years. It's hard for them to be like, I'm going to use an entirely new system right now. So that invisibility part of it, you guys were talking about it being something that just flows easily, connects to your system, does what it needs to do. That's been a challenge for us. We see companies that we think your tool is awesome, but if we can't get people to use it quickly and easily, and it doesn't connect to our back end, we really, we're not gonna pay for that. So we end up building things in-house that do the same thing, that connect to our system. So from a tech standpoint, that's something we really appreciate when you guys build, is the agility of it to work with our systems.
Yeah, compatibility is so important. A lot of technology we've used, the more it works with everything else, the more it works for our agents and the more it works for our clients. So it's important. Some more questions? Because I've got a bunch of them.
I'm just curious about adding more and more stations to charge up electric cars. Is that more than planned? What's going on with that?
Yeah, it's a question about electric cars. Have you guys put space for these chargers?
Yes.
We do. We have a ton of them.
Yeah, the
Oh,
number keeps
yeah.
going up.
And what is the typical cost to install one?
Oh, I'm not a good person to ask that.
You're testing my memory, this was about 16 months ago, but in the $10,000 to $15,000.
Yeah, I'd say.
But that's a new construction. If you can build in all the conduit and everything that's going to run to it, if you have to kind of retrofit it to something that's already in place, obviously the cost goes up.
And potentially 15,000 now to free, depending on your property, and how
Right.
much traffic you have, and what kind of advertising they might be able to do there. So there's a lot of opportunities. And I wonder if you guys have any differences in your properties related to autonomous cars or to parking and all that when it comes to a city like Atlanta, because we're a driving city, right? We're known by our cars, so somebody looks at my car like, oh, I know who you are, right? but you know, in New Jersey, are people driving there? I mean, do you have any differences in your zoning, your use, your planning from different markets?
I would say fortunately here, Tim Keene, the new commissioner, is doing a fantastic job rewriting the code. And there were all types of restrictions on minimum parking, et cetera, that were just outdated and left over from kind of the 80s. So we're fortunate here in Atlanta that they're thinking about that and rewriting the code, but I'm sure y'all have had worse experiences elsewhere.
I mean, it's kind of a hard question to answer, just because we have every kind of property from really suburban to really urban where there's no parking. It's street or deck or whatever. So the expectations are just different anywhere you go. I mean, we've got some properties that are, in New York that are 2 tenants on a block, and that's a totally different thing than what you're going to come across in Atlanta, the big center. So it's hard to answer.
And it's going to be market by market, and it's like we don't know what we don't know at this point, so we haven't put a shovel in the ground on a couple of them. But it's the challenge is, even if we start to evolve, if the tenants haven't and they don't understand why they should, then you're sort of, it's hard to lead the horse. You can lead the horse to water. That creates one of the challenges. It's getting everybody on the same page at the same time.
We're definitely already thinking ahead about it, in terms of, like, we've got a new development happening near Chicago, and there was a whole discussion about, this is brand new, so do we need to have more space that's easier what if autonomous cars do come, or even just Uber and Lyft being a bigger thing now, just for drop-offs that get that kind of out of the way and flowing. And that seems like a very boring, not sexy factor, but yeah, we are thinking about it, making sure it's coming down the pipeline.
You guys using any technology for your security? Any new technology for security?
It's all getting better, but like we said, none of the systems quite talk to each other as
Right.
they should yet, so headed in the right direction.
We talked a little bit, you guys asked earlier somebody about Wi-Fi or beacons, and are we using Wi-Fi counters? And the answer to all of that is yes. We've tested all of it. We've tested all of it to try to see, can we use Wi-Fi to count how many people are in this center and what's their dwell time? Can we use beacons? Can we use cameras to actually watch heat signatures or count cars? Do we use the tubes to count cars? We've used all of these things, but the problem is they don't all go together and show me, are they going in stores and buying stuff? We don't know. Are they coming to your center to go to Panera for 4 minutes and picking up something and leaving, or are they staying there for 4 hours? So that kind of meshing which kind of touches security. We've also talked about that a little bit. And are we aware of who's on property? But no, we haven't been hugely focused. We're open air, all open air centers, so no. Security hasn't been a big change for us lately.
Time for one more question?
Could come down to me again.
I was at OAC, we were talking a week and a half ago at the Open Air Center convention in Dana Point, California. Big shopping center convention. And inevitably, a lot of the questions were from developers asking how to get started. Like, you know, you three are just wonderful examples of what you're doing in tech. Trust me, as far along as anybody that I've been around. So like, to a developer that says, or an owner, I want to get started, I don't really know how to get started, what kind of advice would you give them?
The best course of action is action. Just do it. Just do anything. Dip your toe in the water. And come to events like this where you can learn what other people are doing. I think that's half of it too, is sort of take the, I think technology scares people. And if they don't quite know what it means or how it impacts them, they don't know what the so what is or why they should care, then they are going to just kind of stay in the background. But it's just taking that first step. I guess it depends too on what the problem is they're trying to solve and what technologies are out there and available that could assist them, and then partnering with the right people to pull them over.
I would also say that part of it is just taking risks. Since I've been at Regency, it has changed immensely the culture of taking risks in terms of marketing and IT. And now we're at a place where, working with good technology vendors, we have this ability to say, you know what, we're going to test this for 6 months or 8 months or a year. And if they allow us to do that, we can be agile. And if it fails, it fails, but we tried it. So, and you have to be willing to do that. And if you're working with the right partners who will help you do that, we've had a lot more success with that. So understanding that it's okay to try it, see how it works. It's a culture thing, but it's a big help.
And I'd say just come sit down with us. Real estate is like the most social industry in the world, and people love to gab and have coffees and drinks and whatever. And just as a virtue of being in it every day, I'm at the risk of sounding uninformed, because every time I think I have a good idea for a tech company, I Google it and there's like 48 people involved. But I don't think there are good solutions in place for a lot of these things. And we don't have time to talk about it today, but there are 5 or 6 other just what I think are phenomenal opportunities out there. And if you can just go network with these people and literally just have a coffee with them, presumably if you do it enough times, there'll be a good one in there.
Yeah.
And I would add, as a building owner, investor, you can understand that if you're not looking at technology, you're not expanding your technology in your buildings, the tenants want it, the users want it, the tenant reps, we have a lot of boxes to check, and sometimes the buildings just don't get on the list. So if you're not adding these attributes to your buildings, you're going to start losing tenants. And I think buildings are going to get older faster. I think things are changing a lot faster in commercial real estate than they ever have. And you have to just stay on top of technology.
One of the things that I would add to that if you're someone and you want to know how to get into it, is make sure your building can handle any technology that someone else brings into it, and building the proper infrastructure. It's like when we built Avalon, we put in a gigabit infrastructure. It was the first gigabit community, in the state when we put it in. And it's future-proof. And we've done the same thing at Colony Square. So we are anticipating that our tenants and our retailers are going to probably be leveraging technology way more than we are as the developer. And we have to provide that backbone and that infrastructure so they can succeed.
And I think developers who want to get, like you said, if they want to start doing something, the other thing I would say is ask. I think a lot of developers, we look for out-of-the-box solutions, but most of the stuff that has worked the best for us was when we sat down with a tech company and said, you know what, here's what we need, here are our 5 pain points, and we ended up custom building something together. So it didn't exist, but once we partnered, then it came into being. But you had to sit down and talk about that and ask for it first.
And I'd say one of the frustrating things with technology we use is I'll have to say, look, I want it to do this, and they'll say, well, it doesn't do that, it can't do that, there's nothing that does that, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not that smart. I'm not the first guy thought about this. No, it doesn't. Figure it out. And I like tech companies that listen to their customers, and we use a lot of technology, and I like to be on the forefront of things, and sometimes I get that, and it's a little frustrating. No, there's no way I'm that smart. No, you can do it. Let's figure it out and work together. So, well, great. Let's give a hand to